Thank you very much. I want to start by reading a quote from the part of my research that I'm going to talk about. And it goes like this. I'm interviewing Paul. Paul is employed at a factory in Denmark where they're producing paint. This factory have decided to move part of their production to another country. And Paul, he says, I've helped loads of my colleagues to apply for new jobs, and it has been very rewarding to talk about it with them. We talk about it a lot. Fleming went to an interview the day before yesterday, for instance. I had a chat with him yesterday. We talk a lot about who will get a new job and who we think will fail to do so. We spent a good part of the day on that. And then I say, I see. Do you help each other with ideas about where to look? To some extent, Paul says. For instance, if we spot something in the newspaper, yesterday I told Fleming that he ought to look for a job at the driving center. I know they're often looking for new staff. He could try at least. He likes gardening and mowing the lawn. And there's a lot, and that's how we help each other. It must be pretty sad to work somewhere where you can't talk to anyone. I wouldn't like to work at a place like that. So this presentation is going to be about career guidance in communities. I'm, in my research, very interested in researching and finding out how the decisions that people make, the meaning that they ascribe to the activities that they take part in, how that is always in relation to the context and the community of which they're also part. I'm a professor in career guidance at Aarhus University in Denmark, and I do practice research or action research, which means that my research is always in collaboration with practitioners and participants in career guidance. Nothing happens. I have to stay close to. Okay. Okay. In the middle, there's the book that is my PhD dissertation. In the dissertation, there isn't really any models or advices for action in career guidance. There's a lot of considerations about how can we understand what is going on at the factory and also in other places. After the dissertation, I wrote a book together with two of my colleagues. It's the one on the right. It's called How to Guide in Communities and Groups. Part of that book is also published in a paper which describes the model, which I'm also going to describe to you today. There was a read more slide. I don't think that I need to go into details. You can look at that afterwards if you're interested in where you can read more. So this research is based on critical psychology, which is a social psychology with concepts where I'm trying to understand the relation between the individual, the context, the other people that the person relates to. It's also inspired by critical pedagogy. As I said, I do practice research. I do participatory action research. I'm inspired by institutional ethnography. The research is based on participatory observations. I do try to include the participant perspective, so really trying to understand how career guidance practices become meaningful from the perspective of the client or the participant. And I do it from their everyday lives. Often a lot of research into career guidance will observe what goes on in the room where the guidance takes place. We'll do interviews afterwards with practitioners, participants, or clients. And then we'll assume that what is agreed upon during the interview is also what then happens in the life of the participant. Now, you are all experienced practitioners, and you have probably had the experience that that is not how it works. The participant come back, what you agreed upon last time is not what happened in between the two meetings. So I was trying to find out what then happens in between the two meetings. How does the things that we talk about in career guidance become meaningful when they are supposed to create a change in the life that goes on after career guidance also. In the presentation, I use the word community. And the community is characterized by people conducting their daily lives or parts of them together in the same physical or virtual space. So a community in this sense can be physical, but it can also be virtual. The important thing is that people sustain the community through their joint actions. So for instance, by traveling to a place, you have traveled here, so you then become part of a community. You will stay for the conference. Your actions where you choose to go to sessions will be part of sustaining this community for a while you're together. But you also have different reasons for being here. Reasons that are not the same. I don't know exactly what your reasons are, but I think that they're different. The reasons for sustaining a community will also change over time for different people. I'm also going to talk about reflexive practice, which Anne Conliffe describes as a moral requirement to make available opportunities for others to communicate, and also being aware of how our use of words, that includes me as a researcher in the field, but also practitioners in the field, how our use of words, concepts, theories, orients ways of relating and engaging. So my presentation will have two parts. I'm going to say a little bit more about the research that took place, and then I'm going to introduce you to a model for reflexive practice called Career Guidance in Community. And my hope is to inspire you to find and explore ways of doing career guidance outside your offices. Probably some of you are already doing things, having activities that does not take place in your offices, but perhaps it's not something that you have theorized about or that you have seen explained in a model. So please, that's something that we can discuss afterwards. What we know for a fact about career guidance, as well as many other social practices that are set up to support citizens in our society, is that the ones that are considered by society to be most in need of, for instance, career guidance, they're also the ones that are least likely to turn up. So that's a problem that many social practices are facing. What do we do about that problem? Do we wait until they turn up? We try to get them there, force them to get there? Do we reduce benefits if they don't show up? Or do we actually need to consider other ways of relating and engaging to people that are most in need of the services? So a story I'm going to tell from my research, and it's just going to be one story here. Of course, there's much more in the book, is called the empty office, or we can call it, then we occupied the wall. In the factory that was closing down its production, the human resource department decided to buy a career practitioner to help the employees find new jobs. So it's a service that they will give to the employees. So they engage Ulla. Is Ulla a name in Czech? Is Ulla a name in Czech? No. Does it mean something else? Something inappropriate? Not? Okay, good. Then I will go on using Ulla as a name. She arrives at the factory, and the deal is that she is supposed to set up a career guidance corner. And the career guidance corner was invented by the Women's Workers' Union in Denmark in the 70s. It was invented because the female workers were very unlikely to travel to the office of the union to get guidance about their possibilities for further training. So the union of the women workers said, okay, then the consultants from the union will have to travel to the workplaces and offer workplace guidance. You can also find workplace guidance as a concept in career guidance models. It's not a huge theoretical development, but there are some projects. So she's to set up this career guidance corner, and she gets an office in a building that is next to the production building. And she sits there, she has a computer, she has leaflets, she has advertisement for jobs, and nobody shows up. And I'm there with her because I'm doing participant observations. I spent a lot of time in the factory and nobody shows up. And I talk to Ulla. Then on the third day, 2 men, they come over to the office and they sort of look in like this. And Ulla goes, come on in. And they go, no, we don't want to come inside. And she goes talking to them a little bit. And then she asks them, but if you don't want to come in, why did you come? And then they say, okay, it's because our foreman told us to go. And then they go back. Now, at this point in time, Ulla has 2 choices. Ulla is a very experienced career guidance practitioner. She has been doing this for years. And I think that she expected that this would happen. But her two choices, perhaps you can think of more choices. They are to go to the human resource department and say, this doesn't work. They're not in need of guidance. They don't want guidance. I'll just go home. That's not what she does. She takes her computer back, and then she goes into the production hall. And it's a line production. They produce paint, this smelly, there's buckets on the production line running. And she just stands next to the first worker that she sees, and she starts talking to him, and she asks, oh, how long time have you been working here? And he talks to her, and when did you start? Oh, what did you do when you started? What do you do today? How have work changed in that period of time? What do you think about the next changes that are to come? And she talks to him, and once she sort of feels like they have emptied sort of the conversation, she just moves on to the next one. And she does that for about 3 days. Then we're now on the 7th day in the company. The foreman, he finds Ulla, and he says, we've been talking about it, and in our lunchroom, we have this wall with pictures of the fishing trips that we have taken in this company for the last 25 years. And Bill, he's on all of them. And he's still working here. And then he says, we are talking about taking down all the pictures, and we would like if you would come to the lunchroom instead of the office, and then you can put up your advertisements for jobs in the lunchroom. And Ulla, she says yes, and then changes starts to occur. Because then when there's a break, the workers come into the lunchroom and then they gather. I don't know if you have a saying for this in Czech, but if you're at a party in a province where there isn't any, in the parking lot you have small stones, and when there's a sort of a pause in the party, the men will gather in the parking lot. We call it kicking tires in Danish. What do you call it in Czech? You don't know what I mean? Does any of you live in the countryside? How many live in the... No, you all live in a big city. That's why you don't know. The men gather around the car, and there will be a pause in the party, and they will talk about perhaps smoking and talk about everyday challenges. But the picture is very much the same around the wall in the lunchroom. So the men will gather, they will small talk about the advertisements. And sometimes Ulla will interact and ask them questions. Sometimes they will ask each other questions and give each other suggestions for how to find new jobs. Sometimes when Ulla asks them a question, she can, for instance, say, "Oh, yeah, last week you were talking about looking for a job at the airport. How did that go?" And then the man will go and not answer. And I'm watching all of this, and then afterwards I'm asking Ulla, what is going on? Can you explain to me what is going on? And then Ulla says, well, being part of that group is also creating a safe space. Because if he's not in a position where he feels that he has an answer to this, he can just ignore it. If I was with him alone in a room, that was not a possible position. I would pose an answer and the person in front of me would ignore it in an individual conversation. That's not really appropriate. So, in the analysis, I'm also discussing what is it that becomes visible when we have practices where we invite individual workers to come see us. It's the individual worker who's also at the same time perhaps feeling that this problem with dismissals, the factory closing down its production, they didn't see that as their individual problems. They felt that they were really good at their jobs. They wanted the factory to put together an advertisement advertising the workers to other factories, saying, we have these people, they're very skilled. Unfortunately, we have to lay them off. So now, please consider if they can come work for you. I'm not going to go more into details about the research behind, because I want to move on also to talk about the model. But when we talk about giving career guidance in communities and sometimes also in groups, we know from the literature and also from this study that other positions become available. For instance, the position, should I stay in one place? Am I making your work difficult? That's sort of, okay, no, sorry.
He is very skilled, it's okay.
Okay, good. The position of listening, if you don't know what career guidance is, it's unlikely that you as a person know which questions you can ask and also what kind of answers you can expect. So listening, you can hear and you can also see the answers given to other people. You can get ideas for your own questions. Other people can offer concrete solutions to or discuss problems in relation to the questions you ask. Other people can add perspectives to your perception of the situation based on your own experience. If you noted from the quote in the beginning, Paul had a pretty good idea of what the people he had been working with for 20 years were able to do and what they were interested in. And he wanted to also help them and add his knowledge about them and his perceptions. It's easier to continue the conversations after the career guidance because everybody has heard what has been said. You can discuss it and gain a new understanding of obstacles and your options in maneuvering around or with them. When I asked or interviewed the employees at the factory later on, and I asked them whether they had received career guidance, they would say, no, I have never spoken to anyone about career guidance in my whole life. Okay, maybe my mother had an opinion when I was in school, but I've never spoken to anyone. And then later on in the interview, when I asked them about Ulla, they would go, Ulla, she is great. She has helped me so much with applying for a new job, finding out how to manage electronic CVs and things like that. And then they would say, and do you know what? What is the most amazing thing about Ulla and her work? Ulla will come to the factory even though none of us has an appointment with her. So he had noticed that this person was here to help and support them, and she is here even though we don't have an appointment. Most of the career guidance that took place and helped them move on didn't take place as more formal, structured interviews inside the office. It took place during the workday, during the lunch break. Ulla managed to set up smaller groups. If she found out that 4 of them shared the same interest or problem, she would say, okay, let's sit down half an hour this afternoon, and then the 4 of us will look at this electronic application system that you need to go through. So it was very dynamic and flexible, and the practice was able to adapt to the needs of the employees. So the result presented indicate that career guidance practitioners, researchers, and also politicians cannot assume that career guidance will be perceived as relevant and useful by everyone. But they also indicate that career guidance may be relevant if it provides a context for action in which participants, and the participants are both the employees and the practitioner, they can join forces to analyze and create opportunities to find their way in a situation, calling for particular thoughts and actions in relation to their future educational or vocational participation in society. Okay, how much time do I have left? I'm not done yet. This was halfway. Now we're moving on to the model.
Yes, you have a lot of time, 20 minutes. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm on time. That's good. I'm happy. I didn't expect that from myself, actually. I expected to be using too much time. Okay. So this was where my research stopped. And I was talking about my research with practitioners, and many of them saying, this is very interesting because I know this from my work. This is actually what you are describing is very much how I work. And everyone was happy about that. But then they were also saying, but it's an informal part of my work. It's something that I do to make it function. So it's not at the center. It's something that I have to do. And then I started thinking, okay, what's at stake here? The thing that the practitioners say to me are most important part, because it actually make their work function, is also an informal part. How can we bring that informal part to the center of the practice? And then the idea of developing a model that could sort of help the practitioner saying, oh, but what I'm doing is called career guidance in communities, and I'm following this model, or I'm inspired by this model. So supporting this way of delivering career guidance by giving it a model, and also a way to perhaps doing it in a systematic way. And I sat down with two of my colleagues, and based on the research, we developed this reflexive model. Does this point? Yes. So we call it a model for reflexive practice, which also means that you should not consider this a linear model. You can actually jump into the model at any stage that you feel is relevant for your work right now. Anyway, I'm going to present it starting from here and moving to there. And it has 7 elements. The first one is called creating opportunity, structure, and access to a community. The second one is called, I can't really see, entering the community and increasing visibility, providing career guidance in community, exploring potentials in guidance situations, deciding on guidance activities. I can't see what this one says, and I don't remember. And this one is documenting and evaluating. We'll leave the suspense, and we will get to this very interesting one along the way. So, yep. If you consider a community in the way that I started considering, it's consists of people who do something together that is, it's not for the purpose of career guidance. So they're doing something else together. So they're an existing community. And the first step is to find the community that you want to interact with. Where are the people that you want to reach out to? What are they doing together? And how can you start building a relation with them? There is also another possibility which has also been done, and that is to set up a community and then starting interaction. But the trick is here that you shouldn't set up the community with the purpose of career guidance. The purpose should be something else that is interesting for the people that you want to engage with. We have translated, it was actually translated by Euroguidance Denmark, a collection of cases of career guidance in communities. One of them is a food workshop. And the food workshop came about because the career guidance practitioner who was responsible for young people in an area and reducing dropouts from school, she found out that one of the challenges that the young people shared was not getting healthy food. She was inspired by this way of working, and she went into her manager and she said, I would like to set up a food workshop. And the manager was, excuse me? What do you want to do? I want to set up a food workshop for the young people because I have found out that one of the big challenges and why they don't show up at school is because they don't get proper food. And he was like, okay. And then she said, and then I want to do career guidance in communities once I've got the food workshop running. And he was like, yeah, okay, let's try. And she set up the workshop and engaged the young people. I think there were about 10. And what they did together was cook 3 times a week. And while they were together, they would cook also for the following day. And while they were cooking, she also had the chance to speak to them about how they were doing in school, what she could do to support them. If a person didn't show up to the food workshop, another one of the students would travel to their home with the food that they cooked. And in that way, starting to build a community. So the idea is to build the relation with people who are already interested in something else. So identify a community, make contact and establish collaborative structures. Who do you need to contact in order to gain access and enable community-based guidance? It can be colleagues, management, teachers, others. And this is a very important step, even if you as a career guidance practitioner are employed in the same organization as, for instance, a teacher, and you want to come into the classroom every Tuesday to just be there and see how they interact. There's another case describing that. It was in a vocational training institution, and there was this class where there was there was higher dropout rates, and it had to do with the time of year that they were starting the program. Not to get into much detail, but there was a higher dropout rate, and the career practitioner, she was in her office, and the same situation. The students in that class didn't come to see her, even though they had the highest dropout. So she decided that she wanted to come to the class. They were, the program was carpentry, yeah, and they had a, what do you call that? The workshop, yeah, the workshop every Tuesday where they were doing things with wood. I'm in lack of word here. you probably you know what I'm talking about. And she spoke with the teacher, and he said, no, you're not coming into my class. And then they started talking a little bit more, and she realized that he thought she was going to watch him doing his teaching and evaluate whether he was the reason why there was a higher dropout. And then she was, no, that's not my reason at all. What I want to do is to build relations with your students so that when they experience difficulties, and I know that they do to a higher extent than in other programs, not because of your teaching, but because of other factors, then they know who I am. And she went to the workshop every Tuesday. And while she did that, she also studied her own practice and was able to show how, when she talked with them during the workshop, the students, because she videotaped the differences between the two places, the students would talk more of the time. In comparison with being in the office, she would talk more of the time. She later then interviewed students, and the students that we perceive as stronger students would say, it doesn't matter to us whether you're in your office or in the classroom. We will find you if we need you. The students that were at risk of dropping out would say, we would never come to your office. We really appreciate your help every Tuesday, and it's so important that you're here because we would never go to your office. Okay. So you can be very creative in identifying communities. It can be any kind of group that you think would benefit. Another case is a housing area, deprived housing area, where career guidance practitioners go there because a lot of the students or young people that they want to build contact with live there, and they don't come to see them. Okay. So then when you're there as a career guidance practitioner, visibility is of course crucial. And how do you become visible as a career guidance practitioner when you look like everyone else? So you'd need to consider how people will know who you are and what kind of professional service you bring to them. At the same time, it requires for the practitioner that you are able to administer the resources in terms of time, because time with participants, time with clients are often the most important resource that career practitioners have, of course in combination with their knowledge. Then when you're there, this is where career guidance can happen as part of your participation in the community on the spot. And there's really no difference in sort of the ground or the basic skills that we're always practicing in career guidance, because it's showing empathy, unconditional positive attention, and expanded listening skills. So those are actually the same skills that you would use in individual guidance sessions, but now you try to use them in the community. And then there is also there's the consideration of holding back and taking initiative. And here I'm focusing on the way that career practitioners are often expected to give an answer. So you get a question, you give an answer. That's how you show that you are professional. But if you want people to engage and interact from where they're at in the community, you should consider holding back with the answering part a little bit and try asking if other people share that concern. So inviting more people into the conversation. And also take initiative to invite people. Perhaps you can see that someone is trying to say something, but somebody else is always faster, so they never get the chance to say what they think. And you can ask that person to contribute what they think. And then, of course, there are ethical considerations. 5 minutes, yeah, now it happened. I spent too long time, but okay. There's ethical considerations which are important, but sometimes, and I write about this in my book, sometimes the ethical considerations actually prevent us from engaging with people in groups, because we assume that what they're going to talk about is so private to them that it needs to be an individual conversation. And we cannot just assume that beforehand, but we can make sure that when it happens, we know, for instance, is it possible to move somewhere else just nearby and be more private? But perhaps by being in the community, this person who experienced that the person next to them share the same concern, that will deliberate them from the concerns in a way that they will never know in an individual session. And this approach focuses on that. I need to move on. Then, when you're there, what you're doing is also exploring potentials in guidance situations. And here I'm not talking about exploring the needs, because guidance activities is created of the relation between what people perceive as their needs or other people perceive as their needs, but also the potentials that you as practitioners know from the different theories and models. So you need to find a way of being flexible in the delivery so that what you deliver is considered important and meaningful for the people who are to interact. So what are their concerns? How can you initiate open dialogues about it? How can you examine what characterizes this community? And how can you discuss with them already when you're there new possible activities, so that once they see the invitation, you use the words that they use to describe their problem instead of how you think the problem is. And then I'm going to jump quickly over this one, but then you decide on the guidance activities. So you will learn from this now that this is about really considering the whole service delivery in your guidance practice based on an exploration and with the people who are to benefit from the practice. You need to decide how to organize it. Is it going to be groups, collectively, individually, delivered, online, all of that. And then you develop, plan and implement. And then, of course, perhaps most importantly, when you start changing your practice, you also need to change the evaluation practice to be able to describe the new practice. Just to give you an example, a question in an evaluation could be, have you listened to the career practitioner having conversations with other students? So instead of asking, have you benefited from the possibility of asking questions, and then the person would go, no, because I never asked a question. But if you're practicing this kind of guidance in the lunch breaks, during lunch at an education institution, you need to consider how can your evaluation methods and questions, lost the English word, describe that practice. Okay, so the model is described in details in a publication that's called Career Guidance in Communities, a model for reflexive practice. It's also translated to Polish. I don't think that it helps you, but it is. And you can read the elements that I jumped quickly past. And then I want to say that this way of working has in Denmark developed into a module at the diploma course. There's quite a lot of attention on group methodologies in terms of development projects. And also another interesting thing, right now CEDEFOP is focusing a lot on outreach activities. They are concerned with what we're all concerned with, and that is how career guidance can be meaningful and service to those who are not using the service now, and they call that outreach. I think that was my presentation. If there are any doctoral students among you, I'm going to take the opportunity to invite you to the European doctoral school in career guidance and counseling. And if there's no doctoral students here, but you know one, yes, there's someone who's already taken part. Please let them know that there is a doctoral school in this field and that they are welcome to come. Do we have time for questions? Okay. Any questions?
So think about your questions. I can wait.
Tak, dobrý den, já se jmenuji Lenka Bobošová, jsem z Liberce, jsem sociální pracovník v terénu a vlastně to, co tady říkáte, to je úplně něco úžasného, protože s těmi komunitami pracujeme a chybějí nám tam ty kariéroví poradci, protože máme hodně nezaměstnaných lidí v tom terénu a je dobrý vědět o sobě, že existují sociální pracovníci v různých organizacích a že určitě bychom mohli navázat spolupráci tak, aby jsme těm lidem mohli pomoct společně.
Děkuju.
Well, thank you very much. That's very important information. So almost an invitation to career practitioners to work together. Yeah.
Jestli to není pro vás, jestli chcete vlastně pozvat ostatní spolupracovat dohromady. To bylo vlastně
je to
výzva.
jakoby ta výzva, ano.
Můžete ještě i komentář. Já mezi tím se zeptám, if it's possible to translate it also to Czech language?
Oh.
Přeložit do češtiny? Taky?
You're welcome to translate it to Czech. I would be honored.
To jsem vám jenom dával čas, abyste si promysleli dotaz. Tak kde jsou? So during the lunch break, maybe informally, yeah, like you said in your presentation.
Exactly. You don't want to become visible. That's just fine. We can have some talk in the community during the lunch. I'd be happy to. Thank you very much for listening.
Děkuji.